price we pay for loving someone or something. And so, I was thinking about, I've lost my parents, but they were elderly, and, they were very sick, and there was a lot of history with them. And so it was almost a relief in that does happen with the elderly like that. And so actually, when I lost my husband was the first major grief other than our home, and I'll tell you about that later. But when I lost my husband, it was, I had never, like I said, I'd never lost anyone in death. And it really, it just threw me. It threw me for a loop. It did. It threw me because, he had Alzheimer's. And so, the disease of Alzheimer's is like, it's been described as like you write something on a blackboard, and every day you take an eraser and you erase a little bit of it until it's all gone. And that's the way it is with living with an Alzheimer's person. So I grieved his loss before he ever passed away. And then when he did pass away, I went through a lot of grief, and it's really the last act of love when we love someone enough to grieve them. And so grief is universal. Everyone grieves. And it's not only people that we grieve, the loss of people. Pets, beloved pets. My daughter the family lost the beloved LJ, a little black Shih Tzu, and I just want to cry thinking about it. And, we'd go up in the fall and watch Sunday football games, and I would sit in one of the big chairs, and LJ would come and sit with me. And anyway, it's pets. It's hard to lose pets. Kim has lost so many. I've lost, and so it's, we grieve. We have to grieve the pets. and we can say, well, get another pet, but they can't be replaced. Those cannot be replaced. All right, so let me see what I have here. And then we grieve health. I'm doing a little grieving about my health. I've always been very healthy, and I've got a few challenges, not anything that's not fixable. But we grieve our health. And then we grieve our age. Now, I do have a little grief about that. I do not know where all those years went. And I cannot believe I am 82 years old. But I am. And so I rejoice that I've lived as long as I have. But then there's just a little grief of all of those years, that's gone by. Okay, we grieve lost dreams. We grieve identity. I was thinking about, and I've seen this happen, where, it's not personal. I haven't seen it in my own family, but I have seen kids that were superstars in high school. Superstars. And that was their identity, the quarterback on the team, the Miss, Wiley High School or whatever, all of that. They were just very popular in a small school. And then they'd get out there in the real world and they would lose that. They went out thinking they were going to be. And so there's a grief of losing that status. I didn't, because I never had the status, but I have worked with people that have, well, I was everything in high school, and now, I go to work and I'm just one of the employees. Yep, that's what growing up looks like. But it is a grief, And then it's a grief of lost dreams, jobs, businesses, loss of innocence through abuse. this is something that in working with our trauma clients, and I'm going to talk a little more about that, but you know, working with our trauma clients, they really go through a period of grief when you work on trauma. And, you know, as much as you want to release it and let it go, it creates a vacuum, it creates a hole in the soul when you release it. And so something has to replace that. And there's almost a grieving process that people go through when they have done a lot of work around the abuse and around the loss of the innocence. And you know, usually the grief process hits after they leave here. And then they'll get to questioning sometimes, well, did I even do any work? Well, was the work beneficial? Was there? Yes, it was. And it went really deep, and you did a lot of good work, and now it's about grieving it, grieving the loss of the childhood, or, you know, through the different forms of abuse. Uh, and you know, so what grief is is it's not just about sadness. It's really a complex emotions. It's anger. It's guilt. You know, the guilt of, well, I should have done better. I could have done better. Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? And so we get into that guilt sometimes. Um, I know with my husband, and I will tell you, and I'm going to refer to him a lot, or some, because he is the main person that I've lost, and I miss him every single solitary day. and and I suspect I'll be doing that to the day I die. Uh, but one of the things that I have felt guilty over is he did have Alzheimer's, and I had to hire a caretaker for him. And that was during the time that I traveled more than I've ever traveled in business. I was gone a lot. I did not realize how sick he was. I didn't till I came home one day and some things had happened, and it hit me. It hit me hard that he was very sick and that he wasn't going to get well. I kept thinking he was going to get better. That's the denial and delusion of grief. We think, well, they're going to get better one of these days. And so my guilt, and you know, and I don't dwell in it all the time, is that I spent a lot of time away from him those last years and those last months. And, you know, we can't go back and undo and redo, but we can recognize it and grieve it and grieve that there was a big missing there. Now, also, and I'm not defending myself, I guess I am, I had lost him long before he took his last breath. And Alzheimer's, I mean, they're gone way before they take their last breath. And as bad as it was, and I hate to say this, it was a relief almost for me not to be at home. And there again, I feel guilty that I felt such relief because it's sad. It's sad to watch someone that you have been with and been married, you know, and had children and had good times and bad times and in between times. It's just sad to watch them die a day at a time. So, sadness is complex emotions, the anger, the guilt, some of the relief, you know, the relief, like, it's finished. I know my husband laid 2 weeks when he got, you know, and I want to tell you this, that God gave me a real gift. He was not able to talk, my husband wasn't, and he was in a wheelchair, and we hadn't spent a lot of time together. But on this Thursday, I put him in I gave his caretaker the day off, and we went to the mall. And he was more alert that day than I had seen him in years. In years. We went and got our nails done. He got his done. I got mine done, got our feet done. We went shopping. Everything I tried on, he wanted me to buy it, and he couldn't speak, but he could point and he could, and we just had the best time. We ate lunch out. And then we had to go to the restroom. You go down this long hall at the mall, then you turn left, and there's the restrooms. So I just patted him on the arm, and I said, "Now, you stay right here. I'll be right back. I'm going to go use the restroom." Now, keep in mind, he couldn't walk very well. So I went on to the restroom. I came back, and there was an empty wheelchair. I thought, "Oh my goodness, somebody stole it." An empty wheelchair. And here's this Hispanic man standing there, and he didn't speak very good English, but bless his heart, he was waiting for me to come out. And he was all excited. He was trying to show me where my husband was. My husband had, and I have heard this, that before they die, they will get a surge of energy. And that Thursday, he had a surge of energy. He got up out of that wheelchair, walked all the way down that long hall, and when I caught up with him, he just looked at me and gave me a little chuckle, a little giggle. He knew exactly what he was doing. He would act sometimes like he didn't know what he's doing. He knew a whole lot more than he let on with us. So the confusion, but the relief, like I said, he laid here 2 weeks. The next morning after that, our wonderful Thursday, the next morning, he couldn't get out of bed, but the caretaker and I couldn't get him out of bed. And I called Cam, and Cam came over, and we figured out he'd had a stroke. And so we took him to the hospital. They couldn't do anything for him. He laid there all day. And they said we could either keep him here in the hospital or you could take him home. And I felt like they were rejecting my husband. I don't know. I had so many feelings that day. But we brought him home. He laid here for 2 weeks at a hospital bed. And that was a joyous 2 weeks. People came from all around, young people, older people that he had hired as teenagers. People and his AA people surrounded him. His children, grandchildren, everybody came home. And we gave him a good send-off. We really did. And it was sad. It was all of those feelings, but there was also, it was also a lot of fun and a lot of going back and telling of stories. And and then there be confusion is a lot of confusion. And what confusion does is it clouds reality. When people have had a death, they'll just say, "Well, I'm just so confused." Well, it's a lot about not wanting to face reality. And so it's about the confusion clouds reality. And it's about just sitting with the confusion. And so, like I said earlier, there's different kinds of grief other than a death. I think, and I've worked with a lot of people that have had this, I think the grief of a divorce is harder than a grief of a death. Because when a person dies that you're married to or that you love, they died loving you. With a divorce, it's a whole different story. And there's a lot of grief of knowing, going back and looking, and I have people do a life map of where their relationship started, and and look at the good times. But there's a lot of grief with divorced couples, and then we can, and I'm going to say this: we can grieve a house, a home. I always had this dream of buying an old house and remodel it to make it look like Father Knows Best, that TV show. So we had, at that time, we had 3 little toddlers, and we had our 3 children, little ones, and 3 teenagers. And we were going to put those kids in a station wagon and go to Estes Park, Colorado on vacation. And I weighed almost 300 pounds. That was not something I was looking forward to. We lived on the north side. For some reason, I had to come to the south side, all the way out toward where Buffalo Gap is kind of, and I don't know what brought me out here on Buffalo Gap Road. But I looked up, and on the top of this little hill was an old white house, and there was a sign out front that said for sale. And it was hand printed, and I drove up there, got the phone number. I went home and called the woman, and I found out that house, they were asking as much for that house as it was going to cost us to go on that trip. And we had already bought our travel checks. I don't know how many people, back then you brought traveling checks instead of credit cards. I don't know how many people have ever bought a house with traveling checks, but I did. I took that money. Those teenagers hated my guts for it. But we had bit off more than we can chew, and we'd bought this big old house in town, brand new, and had, all those bedrooms and all. And I didn't like a new house. And my husband looked at me one day and he said, I don't like a new house. I said, I didn't either. So anyway, he was kind of joyful when I told him and took him out to show him my house. And it needed so much work, so much. It took us 13 years to remodel that house. Now, it didn't mean we worked on it all the time, but it ended up pretty much a showcase for us. And it was my house. It was my house. Our house, but it was really my house. And I loved every inch of it. And so, the kids grew up, they left home, we had this big old house, and I was out of town, and my husband called, and he said, there's a group of people that are wanting to buy our house. I said, well, it is not for sale. And he said, well, I want you to listen. And we had some land out front, and he said, they want to buy that. It's the Catholic Church, and they want to buy the land in our house and 2 houses next door for the Catholic Church property. And I said, our house is not for sale. It is not. Well, I came home. He, of course, couldn't sign the papers without me, but he pretty much made a decision to sell the house. And I hated his guts for it. I wanted to slap him, but I didn't. I got over myself. And then he said, we'll build us a new house over in Fairway Oaks, which is a country club thing, and we'd had some land over there. And we built us a new house, and I did not like that house. I never liked it. He didn't either. But anyway, it was one of the biggest griefs I ever had was moving out of that house the day that we moved. And I grieved that house for years. And I had a new sponsoree, and she was there helping me move, and I was crying and moving, and I said, I've known that we were going to move for 6 months, and I have been grieving this house. And she said, well, I really didn't think you could grieve anything until you lost it, until you gave it up. And that is so true. We can't grieve it till we actually feel the loss of it. We can think we're grieving it, but until we actually lose something or someone, that's when the grief hits. And so she taught me a lot about that. So, anything tangible like that, there can be a grief, and especially if there's a story connected to it. Loss of relationships, friendships, boy, there's grief in that. Loss of roles. I know when children grow up, You got a different role. When you live years of being, homeroom mother and 4-H leader and this mom and that mom and working this and working that, and all of your time is spent on your children, and you want it to be like that, and then you blink twice and they're all gone. And so your role changes. You're no longer that PTA mother. Your kids are gone. And I don't know if men go through this grief, you know, and I will admit there is some relief in a way when they're all gone, but that doesn't last very long. And particularly when when that last one leaves home. Uh, but for any of them, each time, we were talking about this the other night, each time I would take one to college, I just act real strong and da da da, and you're going to have so much fun. It's going to be wonderful and blah blah blah, and then cry all the way home. Hysterically cried while I had to pull off the side of the road. One thing, my role was changing. I was no longer, yes, I was their mother, but it's different when they're out of the home. So that's a grief. And I don't know if men go through that as much as women, but I certainly did. Because my husband and I made a decision that neither one of us came from very healthy homes. And we made the decision, or I made it and he went along with me, but we made the decision early on that we were going to make our kids a priority, and we did. Not, and I hope not in a hovering way, but we were there. We showed up for our kids. We never missed. The only time we'd miss a sporting event, we had 4 playing, and we'd be running all over 2, 3 little towns trying to make all of those games. But anyway, when all that was over, there was a grief. There was a grief. There was new beginnings, but there's still a grief. And so change in general is a grief. And then there's such a huge grief in addiction. And I'm speaking to the choir here. When you give up an addiction, because addiction works for us, food works for us until it doesn't, alcohol works for us, drugs, as bad as it sounds, giving it up, there is a grief, there is a vacant spot there. And it's like, well, what do I do now? And I think especially with the food, because food was my go-to for everything, everything. If I was sad, I'd eat over it. If I was excited, and I'd eat over it. If I was mad, I would eat over it. I couldn't do anything till after I'd eat over it. And so it takes up a lot of time and attention. So when you take away the substance, when you take away the addiction, there is a grief. I grieved in this, and this sounds, but I grieve certain foods. I don't today. I know today in recovery, I'm in recovery for 40 years from my eating disorder. Actually, I can eat anything I want. I just choose to not eat certain things, and eat. Like I said, food has taken its proper place. But I'll tell you, there was a big grief at first of giving up, I think, any addiction, because what you do, don't only give up the substance, but you give up. I had binge buddies, binge buddies. And when I got back from treatment, I had one in particular, and she really never spoke to me again because we couldn't go binge at this certain place every Tuesday, you know. And so it's, when your whole life has been around food and your relationships have been around food, I was the matriarch of the family. I was the one that did the big Thanksgiving, the big Christmas, the big Easter, the big this, the big. I cooked, and I fed people, and that's how I got my good feelings about myself. I got home in October, and I could not do Thanksgiving. I couldn't. I knew I could not do that. And that is the first Thanksgiving that we didn't have a house full of people. My sister and her kids would come. We would invite our AA people. We would invite anyone that didn't have a place to go, we'd invite them. And they'd come in and out all throughout the day. And we all loved that. But I couldn't do it early on in recovery. And some of my family members didn't like that. I have a nephew that still won't speak to me because of that. Well, ever since you've got out there to that place in California, you're just not the same person. Thank God I'm not. And those of you that are in recovery from addictions, be aware of that, because all those good buddies and people you've hung out with, they're not going to like you, or they're not going to want to hang out with you. And, and like with food addiction, if when you quit feeding them, they'll probably not want to be around you as much. Okay, so there's common myths and misunderstandings and things that people say that are not true. Don't listen to them. My friend Rose is here. This kind of could be one that for her. When people say, oh, don't worry, time heals all wounds. Time, you're going to get over it. You're going to get over it. Time heals all wounds. Don't say that to someone that's grieving. There is no timeline for grief. We do not know. I mean, when we love someone deeply, I don't care if we've remarried, if we've started another life, if we've done this, we've done that, the grief is still going to come back. Allow yourself space to do the grieving, and do whatever you have to do to grieve. And two, find something that will fill up that vacant spot. For instance, when my husband passed away, my daughters and I, particularly Kim and Christy, because they lived in town, we had a big plot. We do have a big plot out. A family plot out. You want me to say plot one more time? We have a family plot out at the cemetery, and it's a little country cemetery, and you can do anything you want to out there. And so what Kim and Christy and I did, we went out there and we made it beautiful. We planted grass, and there happened to be a water spigot right there by our plot. We'd take a water hose. We planted grass. We made flower beds. We planted flowers. For 2 years, we kept everything out there alive. We would put out seasonal flowers. And what that called for, that we would have to go every day, or in the summertime, to water, or every other day. Kim's on here, and she'll probably agree with me. That was a time for grieving for us. Christy would join us many times. And in 2 years, we looked at each other. I looked at Christy, I looked at Kim, and we were done. And we put down AstroTurf, and now I put out artificial flowers, change them seasonally. Gone are those beautiful flowers that worked on for 2 years. But that was good for us because it took up space, and we were doing something in our heart. I do not regret a minute of it. We still have the AstroTurf out there. I have gone, my friend, good friend, and like my granddaughter Misty, we took a picnic. Didn't you go with me on a picnic out there one day? I've gone out there for picnics, sit on that AstroTurf, and on the early days I'd go out there and by myself, and I would just fuss at Ariel. I would be so mad at him, and that is a part of grief. Allow yourself to be angry, and I just fuss at him. What I was so angry at him about is here. He had worked all of his life. I had worked. We'd looked forward to retirement. And he retired, but he went back to work for his son. He worked over at Shades. He still really didn't retire. But by the time he could have retired, he was too sick. we had such a missing there, and so I got very angry at him, and so I'd sit out there at the cemetery and just fuss at him, and I bet he's down there just chuckling, at me, and so my thought about doing something constructive like that, like us planting the flowers, do something to fill up that void. And you may, do something like volunteer, go to the nursing home, go here, go there. But it worked for Kim and myself and Christy. And before my husband died, I was not a go to the grave type of person. Never, never. I think I've been back to my parents' grave maybe twice in all these years. I'm not that kind of person until I lost my husband. And we have a bench out there, and I'll go out there and sit and talk to him, and he talks back to me too. So, and I'm not crazy. Okay, so the thing is, I was lost. I got pretty lost without my best buddy of 51 years. Now, I'm not saying all of that was just, glorious, that glorious 51 years. But I will tell you, the good times, the bad times, the in-between times, I missed him, and I still miss him today. And I felt those early days after everybody left, the house had been full for weeks. We had people in and out, and then all of a sudden, everybody goes home. Everybody goes home. And I felt pretty lost when everybody went home. And I had a friend from South Texas call me, and she knew to time it like that. She knew everybody had left. She said, "Have they gone?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Are you tired?" I said, "Give out." She said, "This is what I want you to do." She said, "I want you to go to bed, and I want you to sleep, lock your front door, turn off your phone, and I won't tell your kids what you're doing, and I want you to sleep as long as you want to sleep. Stay in that bed and sleep." I stayed in that bed for 3 days. She said, "When you get hungry, get up and eat. If you're not hungry, don't eat. Forget about that meal plan. You can go back on it or whatever you need to do. Just feed yourself appropriately and rest and rest. Do not take any calls." And you know what? I took her at her word, and I did that. I climbed into that bed and I put that comforter up over me. And what it did, it scared my kids to death because they'd never really seen their mom, unless I was sick, like really withdraw. But I told them, I said, "I'll call you when I'm ready. I'll call you." And in 3 days, I was done, and I called him, and we got together, and so do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. Rest when you need to rest, sleep when you need to sleep, work out in the yard if that's what you need to do, feed yourself when you need to feed yourself. So in this, another myth that is people say is be strong for others. What happens, you don't have to be strong for others. Let them have their own grief process. We heal when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. You don't have to put up that tough front and hold everything in. It's okay to be vulnerable. Let that heart speak to you. Another myth is, well, you should be over it by now. My goodness, your husband has been gone, blah, blah, blah. You should be over it. Grief has no expiration date. Do you hear me? Grief has no expiration date. You can't put a time limit on grief. I'll tell you, this is April, May. My husband died in April. And so these are, not hard times, but memories come up. Memories. Looking out there at that swing. I can look out my back window right here at the swing that I have in the yard. Right after the funeral, all the kids were here, and our good friend Ashley Judd was here. We were all out there in the yard, and I sat in the swing, and one by one, all of my kids and everyone that was here came and sat in my lap, and I rocked them in that chair, in that swing. And those are sweet memories when I look out there at that swing. And then after a while, Ashley got up and she said, "Okay, I know what we're going to do. We're going to play running charades." You know, this was the day of the funeral, and she got us up playing running charades, and we had fun and we laughed. It did not interfere with our grieving. It just put, we just put a little fun in there, and Ariel would have loved it. My husband would have loved it. Okay, so grief is a process. It is not just a straight line. You're not just going to go through with it, done, got that done, check. It's not like that. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and I know y'all have all heard this story, but I'm going to tell you again. She was a social worker. I always thought this was a deep something that she really wanted to do. No, she was a social worker, and she had to write a paper for her degree. And so they gave her a list of things to write about. And by the time she got around to picking her topic, the only one of the few topics left was grief. That wasn't something that I thought it was just this deep, burning, desire of hers to write about grief. So she knew nothing about grief. She'd really never lost anyone real close to her. So she thought, well, I'll go to the hospital. There was a large teaching hospital there in the town where she lived. It was huge. And if you want to know anything in a hospital, go to the head nurse. And so she made an appointment with the head nurse and went and talked to her, and she knew that there was a morgue in the bottom of the hospital. And she asked the head nurse, she said, "Do you think that I could interview some dying people?" And that nurse said, "We don't have any dying people here." Now keep in mind, there was a morgue and people were dying all around her, but her first response was, "Well, we don't have any dying people here." Now, that is the first step in the grief process, is denial. That nurse was denying it, denial, and that's what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross put as number one, is denial, is don't even know I'm lying. When we're in denial, we don't even know I'm lying. I know for 2 weeks, my husband laid in that bed sick. People came to see him. Hospice came. The chaplain came, our doctor came because he was a friend, ministers came, everybody. But I denied he was dying. And I would go in there and talk to him, and I'd say, "I'm just going to let the kids have all these people here. I'm going to let the kids do whatever they want to do because I know you're going to get better." That's denial, folks. It is denial. And it is, I wanted him to get better so much. So, denial, this grief process, we go through the grief process not just in a death. It's any loss that we have. And when you have a loss, if you don't allow yourself to go through the grief process, you'll get stuck there in a certain stage of grief. And for instance, a job or a business or a relationship, divorce, these are very, life-changing events that need to be grieved. So denial is don't even know I'm lying. When we're in the denial, we don't know that we are denying it. But once we get past the denial and think, this is real, this is really real, then, now I've changed I've changed this process up a little bit because this is the way that I went through it. So You do, as you go through it, you will kind of go through it your own way. So the denial was first for me. Then it was bargaining with God, bargaining about the situation. God, get him up out of that bed and or out of that casket. I know we'd all gone out to dinner the night that they called and said that the body, was ready, and we were all out at the Perini's having dinner. The people that had already gotten in, and all of a sudden I knew that I had to go see my husband, and the kids wanted to go, and I said no, you don't. I need to go by myself. And so I went up to the funeral home, and it was late. They haven't attended on duty all night, but there wasn't anybody there but me. And I said, I want to go see my husband. I want you to open the casket, and I want you to shut that door. And I went in there, and I bargained with God, and I begged God to get him up out of that casket. When you do this, go through the grief process, it doesn't even seem rational at the time, but this is what I had to do. And then that bargaining, I knew God wasn't going to bring him back alive, but I told him, I'll be a better wife. I'll quit working. I'll stay home with him more. All of that bargaining stuff. And then the anger hit. And I did anger work over that casket. I screamed at him. I was so angry at him for dying on me. Now that is okay. We must be angry, get that anger out. And then once we get the anger out, what it turns to is depression. That's when the pain hits, the depression. And what we call that pain, the depression, is going through the dark night of the soul. And if you don't allow yourself to go through the dark night of the soul, you're not going to get to the other side. And this, you're going to go through these stages over and over and over. But when you get to that depression, and it's not clinical depression, it's situational depression, but if you don't allow yourself to go through it, you can get stuck there, and it can turn to clinical depression. So the dark night of the soul it's important to feel the pain. And then pain hurts. Pain hurts bad. Do y'all like pain? I don't like pain. It hurts. But if you allow yourself to feel it, what you're going to do is you're going to take a deep breath, and you're going to surrender. I give up. I can't do this anymore. I surrender. And then once you surrender, you move into acceptance. Acceptance. And when you move into acceptance, there's a lightness about you. It hasn't changed the situation. You can still go through every one of these steps, and you will again, over and over and over. And there will not be in this order necessarily. But after you go through these stages, you are going to get to a place of acceptance. And like I said, you may get there many times to the acceptance, but when the acceptance comes, the pain lessens, the clouds part, you can breathe again. You can breathe again. And so what I say is celebrate, celebrate the acceptance, and celebrate what you got out of this relationship with this person, or the event, or the business, or the, whatever you're grieving, the relationship. Celebrate it. When you get to that acceptance, thank God for it. Okay, so there are healthy and unhealthy ways to grieve. Healthy grief allows expression, it allows connection, and be that person that someone can reach out to. When you're in the grief process, you may want to do it all by yourself, all by myself. When you're all by yourself, you're alone. Guess what? You're alone, totally alone. You do need to spend time with yourself, but you also need to reach out and connect with another person. So healthy grief is to be that person that someone can reach out to. Make yourself available if you've had that same situation. Anytime I can visit, or anytime you want to talk to me, I'd be glad to visit with you. So make yourself available. Uh, Unhealthy grief is just keeping it all to yourself. Healthy grief is sharing it. Unhealthy grief may invite avoidance. Some people avoid grieving at all cost. This is when addictions might start up. You might not have had an addiction before. You might have dabbled in, alcohol and drugs, maybe in college, you might be one of those that will lose weight and gain weight and all of that, but never had a real problem with it. But if you have a grief that you don't grieve and it's over a long period of time, what you will do, you will start reaching out for something to bring inside yourself to get some relief. And if you have the brain chemistry of an addict, if that brain chemistry has never been activated, guess what? If you start drinking, and I see this happening all of the time, where young widows have lost their spouse in tragic accidents or something. Maybe they've never drank before. They will start drinking, and women, their metabolism is different than men, and they can become instant alcoholics when they're reaching out to something to bring inside to make themselves feel better. If you're prone to have food issues, they can get worse during grief if you refuse to go through the grief process. You'll just stuff it down with food, with activity, with work addiction. Go back to work the next day after the funeral. Oh, I'm fine. I am fine. That's stuffing it down. And it's blaming someone else, or like I said, or shutting down. So the thing about another thing that is, we must grieve, and this is a whole different subject, but we must grieve if we have had any form of childhood trauma. We've worked with a lot of people here that have had childhood trauma, and there's no, someone can have this much, trauma, and this one have this much trauma. There is no, you can't measure it. If you have had trauma is trauma. It can be one incident. And if you don't work on that and get to the core of it and do your work, and grieve the loss of it, what will happen is you will stuff it down, and it will find a way to come out. And it's usually through unresolved anger, unresolved grief, and it's about do your work. With a trauma-informed therapist. And there's good talk therapists out there. I'm not putting down any therapists, but make sure if you're suffering from grief, go to if you've had any form of childhood trauma, because I'll tell you, a death will bring up trauma of the past. I want you to think about that. If you've had a death, particularly a close family member, it will, at times, not with everyone, but majority of people will go back and pick up some of that unresolved grief from trauma in the past. So if you haven't grieved losses along the way, if you have a big loss, boy, you're going to go back and you're going to gather up all of those losses at one time. So go to a trauma-informed therapist and do the work. do the work. And grieve a bad childhood. If you didn't have a good childhood, grieve the bad childhood. I don't like early on, we used to do, when they started adult children of alcoholics, there was a slogan that said, "It's never too late to have a happy childhood." I don't like that. I do not want to go back and be a kid again. I wouldn't if I could. But what I can have is a wonderful adult life. And at times I can be childlike, not childish, but childlike, and be playful and have that playfulness. Okay, so there is healing and there is hope. And what helps? You me to tell you what helps? Naming it. Name the grief. Name it. Feel it. Feel the grief. And then share it. Share it with someone. Don't just keep it all right in here. A burden or a grief kept inside doubles, at least doubles. If you keep that grief in here and you don't share it, it's gonna double and manifest itself in a way outside yourself that is not healthy. And that's called prescription drugs, that's called overeating, that's called alcohol, it's called, a lot of things to ease that pain. So a burden or a grief shared cuts the pain at least in half. You share pain and it's going to cut it in half at least. And you keep sharing it with, a willing listener. You don't have to tell everybody that you've come in contact with, but have someone that has a listening for you. That's a gift for people to have a listening for each other. Find someone that has a listening for you. And so another thing, particularly when you've lost someone in death, have rituals or memorials. There's music that I hum a lot, and I can't hardly hum it without crying. But my husband and I both liked, it's an old song written in the World War II. It's called My Buddy. We called each other Buddy. He was my buddy, I was his buddy. And when I lost my best buddy, that song meant a lot to me. And the girls had it played at his funeral. And so do a headstone. I mean, we got a little carried away by the headstone, but that's all right. My son is very wealthy, and he said, "You girls pick it out. Mom, you and the girls pick it out. I'll pay for it." He said it, so we did. And we have a nice funeral plot, and it did cost him a lot of money, but that was good for him to be able to do that. That was good for my son, because we grieve different ways. And I will tell you, he goes to that cemetery every week, sometimes 2 or 3 times. There'll be and he doesn't come by here, but somehow I'll find out that he's been to that cemetery. People grieve different. He grieves very quietly, but one of the things he did is he had the money. He wanted to pay for all of the services. He wanted to pay for that memorial, and so beautiful headstone. Another thing that we did is, and you can do, and it doesn't have to be large, you can give scholarships in honor of a loved one. Give a scholarship to a kindergarten or a scholarship, and that's what we did. We gave a scholarship to St. John's, a school that my grandson went to. And we gave it in my husband's name. That's a way of honoring him. And then another way that a ritual, it is a ritual that we have. And I want to say, it is a ritual. We sit around the family table anytime now that we sit around that table in there, we get to talking about Papa and telling Papa stories. We do. And that's good. Tell funny stories. Tell the stories. Don't think just because they're gone that that you should quit talking about them, that you're going to keep them too alive. Keep them alive. My Lord have mercy. I was with my husband 51 years, and he'll be alive with me until the day I die. No, I'll just take him with me. I'll be there beside of him, So we sit around the family table and we talk about Papa and tell stories about Papa. And then we get to tell him about all the good things. We get to talk about how sweet he is, and a lot of times we'll get to crying. We have got him up on such a pedestal. We've got him lifted up into sainthood. That's what happens when they die. We just make them better and better and better. He's pretty far up there, I'll tell you. He always was. But he could be a stinker too. So he was a joker. So we sat around and remember his corny jokes. And he wanted, this was his one request. He said, now when I died, he said this forever. He said, now when I die, what I want you to do is on my tombstone, I want you to put on there, have you heard the one about ... And we did, and it's on his tombstone. Have you heard the one about so-and-so? And then he wanted us to make a sign and put it on him. When people came by and looked in the casket, they could see this. Have you heard the one about? And they would go by and they'd be kind of shocked and they would walk away laughing. That was him. That's who he was. He loved a good joke. And then and I know a lot of people do this, we have pretty much a ritual every time we see a red cardinal. Now, sometimes, we see a red cardinal, Misty says, there's my dad. I'll say, no, there's Ariel. And so red cardinals do represent death or life after death. Okay, so what hinders our I've got to hurry. The grieving process is toxic positivity. Don't try to just be so positive all the time. Allow yourself to feel the feelings. Don't just go around and be, just happy, joyous, and free all the time. If it's not real, that's toxic positivity, where you're covering up how you really feel. Get to a support group, and then, support someone that's grieving. One of the ways you can do that is by listening more and speak less. That's what I said a while ago. Have a listening for somebody. Just listen to them. That's all they need. Don't try to fix people. Just be a witness to their pain. Just sit there and witness. And then say something like, I'm here with you. I don't know what to say, but I do care. I don't know what to say, but I care for you, and I'm here. Avoiding saying things like, well, at least you had 51 years. Don't say things like that. Well, at least you had a good husband. Well, at least, don't say things like that to people that have just lost someone. Or don't say things like, well, everything happens for the best. No, it wasn't the best for my husband to die or for you to lose a loved one. That wasn't the best thing to happen. Don't say that to people. Well, everything happens for the best or for a reason. And so share your grief story your way. And share it with others when it's appropriate. Acknowledge the strength that it takes. If you know someone grieving, acknowledge their pain and the strength and energy it takes to grieve. So, in closing, what I'd like to say is write affirmations about grief. And a few of them is grief is a lover's echo. Grief is a lover's echo, and that's sweet. You don't have to get over it. You grow around it. You're allowed to grieve in your own way and in your own time. So make some affirmations about grief. So I'm not going to go over all of them, but just think about affirmations. And then Also, it's okay to laugh again. Remember, it's your loved one would want you to laugh and play and have fun and to go on living. And when it's time, when it's appropriate, write a goodbye letter. Write a goodbye letter. Thank the person for being in your life or place or animal, whatever you've lost, a job, a home, a business. Write about it. Thank that person, place, or thing. And then write the ways that they've contributed to your life. Number two is write how you met. There's always a story about how you met. Write that about how you met. Number three, write what was special about that person. Write about the specialness about that person, the funny little things that only the two of you might have done, or write about the place that you're grieving, or whatever you're grieving. Write about it and how you connected with that special part. And then the last thing is thank the person again for the gifts of life that they gave you. The gift of that, thank that little sweet LJ for all the joy he brought to all of us. All of us. Thank that person for bringing the life that they did to all of us and the joy that they brought. And then tell them goodbye. And you may have to do this many times. Tell them goodbye doesn't mean you're just going to stop grieving. It means so long for now. So I've asked my friend Misty and my best friend and my little adopted granddaughter to sing a little song. It's a song that I love. We had it sung at my husband's funeral. I know I didn't leave time for questions or shares, but it's my show. What can I say? I just wanted to give you everything I could about grief, because grief is real. Please allow yourself to feel it. I'm going to move over here.
I'll stay in here with you.
And I wanted, and this is a big deal. She's doing it a cappella. I called her last night at 11 o'clock and asked her if she would do this. This is what friends do. Oh yeah, Minnie, I'll do that. All right.
It's just a snippet and y'all can sing it with me. Hopefully I'll start off in the right key. I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's bright and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you.
Thank you, Misty. Thank all of you for being here. I hope you've gotten something that could be helpful in your process of grief. And grief is ongoing, and don't rush yourself through it, and be prepared that you'll think you're through grieving a certain situation, a certain person. You'll think well, I've done that, I'm finished. And then you'll be driving along someday and you'll smell a certain smell. You'll hear a song on the radio. You'll see the sun shining a certain way. and the tears will come to your eyes because it will bring up a memory of that loved one. And cherish those memories. Cherish those memories. And then it's okay to get mad at them too for leaving us. So have a good rest of the week. And next week, please join us. We're going to do a subject that I've never talked about. And there's some people on here that I would like to really join in and help, because some of you, I know you real well, and some of you have had this, and it's called church hurt. You know, we go to church. Church needs to be a refuge where we go and, but sometimes, you know, churches, not sometimes, but churches are made up of fallible people, and people make mistakes. We're not all, I mean, we make mistakes, even those people in churches. And so mistakes made, things happen that create church hurt. So join me next week as we talk about this. Bring your church hurt to us, because we want to talk about this, because I keep getting people who want to talk, because there's really no avenue, no place for them to talk about it. So we're going to talk about it here. All right, have a good rest of the week, and good to see all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tennie. Love you. Love you.
Thanks, Tennie.